Welcome to the Elevating Funeral Service podcast. If you want to run a successful funeral home, cemetery, or pet cremation service, you don't have to be the one that has the lowest price. You do need to be the one that offers the most value, provides the best customer experience, and clearly communicates that in your marketing. On this weekly podcast, Ellery and Welton will show easy ways to demonstrate value to families and create differentiation that helps you stand out from the competition. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Elevating Funeral Service. I'm your host, Ellery Bowker. I'm with my good friend and co-host, Welton Hong. And first, we apologize for the delay, but we've been out for a few weeks, but we're back with the conventions going on, the virtual conventions, and just a lot of other things. We've been really busy, so glad to be back. We've got a really, really good episode we're going to talk about today, which is going to be about setting goals for 2021. Welton, I am sure, just like you, I'm ready for 2020 to go away.
Oh man.
One of the good things about 2020 is that it's almost over.
Almost.
Yeah.
It will go by very fast. So typically the last few weeks goes by very, very fast.
Yeah. Well, my number one goal for 2021 is that we don't carry any of 2020 over into 2021.
Oh, I hear you.
Pardon me. So yeah, we got a great episode today. What we're going to do is we're going to talk about, if you're a funeral home owner, how you can position yourself to grow, right? And that's kind of the basic idea of it is, how you can grow your call volume, grow your market share, et cetera. So as a typical business, you're probably going to have set goals for different departments, right? For staffing and for, product development. But in the context of this episode, we're really going to be talking about marketing. So setting some goals, marketing. So I'm going to let Welton kind of kick this off, but I think we'll just kick around some different ideas on some things they can be doing, and we'll see what we can come up with.
Right. Yes, I learned quite a bit from our clients, and that for many, many years is the larger they are, or the more they plan way ahead. Many of them started their planning process in October already. They started setting their goals. Then in November, they start locking in things because might have to go to different departments for budgeting. And most likely by end of November, they're already done with their marketing calendar, marketing plan, everything. Knowing that some of these strategies might take a while to come to fruition. If they wait until January 1st to even just fire off some of these weapons, there's no way you're gonna start to get that many call volume right away, starting right on January 1st. A lot of these will take time to come to fruition. Some of these strategies, even they start firing off on January 1st, it might be late spring before these strategies start working.
Sure.
So I learned a lot from these large companies. They really do plan a lot earlier on, starting in October.
Yeah, I heard it once, and I do the same thing. We try very earnestly to get started on it early. Right. I heard a person say one time, and I thought it was a great analogy. He said, imagine if you were at the bottom of a hill on a bike, and you're parked at the bottom of the hill, and your job is to just start pedaling. You got to start pedaling up that hill. Right. It's very hard, right? But if you back up, and get a running start, then you can kind of get up that hill. So I kind of look at that as kind of backing up a month or two or three, because you can get that running start, so you can kind of hit the ground running in January.
Yeah, me personally, I started that process back in October. Now, it's almost more than a month now. I'm still trying to figure out what are the right strategies. It's now knowing this is my new target. Man, it's not that easy. It's not like arbitrary number. I just said, I want to get to this next year, and I'm done. Just carving out that game plan is so difficult. Thinking through a bunch of contingency plans, just different things, so difficult to even come up with the plan.
Yeah. I wonder too, and again, those that do this all the time, that's probably not who I'm talking about here, but those of you, like many of us, that get to January 1st and, you're like, I got to be 20 pounds lighter, right? Or I'm going to go do this in my business, or I'm going to go do this. A lot of times we set unrealistic goals,
right?
So as a business, for me, we always try to go by a percentage. Like I want to grow by 5% or 10% or 20%. So you talked earlier offline with me about funeral home setting goals in the context of call volume. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. So typically right now, starting in October, we started going through the process with our clients, start asking what metrics we typically track their call volume, obviously. the revenue as well, revenue per call. So now for the following year, they typically let us know where they want to go. Then in November, we'll sit down with them and kind of show them, hey, these are the marketing strategies that might help you bridge that gap. I think the issue whenever even it's very difficult for me to go over these marketing plan with them because there's so many uncertainties. But the good thing here is let's start planning it now rather than wait until January or February to do that marketing plan with them.
Yeah. It's interesting. Do you find that they're focusing more on kind of just one simple metric like call volume, like that's what they're looking at because that's the easy one to track? Or do you think that they're concerned more? Well, I know they're probably concerned, but do you think that they really pay attention to increasing the revenue per call or the profitability, I should say?
Right. Interesting, Ellery. The more savvy they are, the more metrics they track, but most of them just go by call volume. But that's not a very good gauge of the whole health of the business. So the
Right.
more healthy they are, they track revenue per call, profitability, all those. Right.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting because, and I've heard, I think some, Dan Assard or Jake Johnson or one of those consultants were talking about it one day, and I heard him say, you can grow your call volume and you lose, you made less money than you did last year.
Yeah, right. That totally happened.
Right. Like forget about call volume, worry about, profit, are you, what you're taking home at the end of the year. It's interesting, Welton, and I wonder how many people think about this, and I'm sure they do, but for me, I always try to put myself in the shoes that if I was a funeral home owner, right? And truthfully, I'm not, that I'm not a funeral director. I'm not a funeral home owner. I just get the pleasure of working with funeral home owners all the time.
Yeah.
But I would think about it more from a percentage standpoint of market share. Like I would probably use that as my benchmark. So, and to do that, of course, you have to know how many deaths occurred in your market. But I would try to benchmark my growth off of that. So
I love that.
So for example, if you do 100 calls and you're 15% of your total deaths in your area, the call volume really doesn't matter. What really matters is that 15%, because if the total deaths go down, your percentage should go down in a relative form, right? So that to me is something that I would probably look at.
I love that.
Do you think many do that, or?
I don't think many do that because many of them are like, hey, it's hard for me to set a goal because it varies based on the death rate. That's why I love your metric there is the percentage of the pie.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Because in that case, you could go down to 95 calls, but you went up to 18 or 20% of the pie, right? And it's only happening because the mortality is going down, but you actually grew. So that call volume to me is an easy metric, right? And it kind of keeps you on track. But I would obviously look at profitability seriously, and then I would look at kind of the percentage of the pie. And the only way to do that is to track the obituaries, in your area. And then what's interesting too is if you did that, which I don't know exactly how you would do that because you can only count your competitors in that area. But one thing that I've noticed and I've seen it firsthand is that whereas you used to look at a market and maybe say, okay, it's a 3 to 5 mile range, right? A radius around your funeral home. That radius is just expanded, a ton when it comes to cremation. Burial is a hyper local event. You're typically not going to go 1 or 2 towns over to bury somebody unless that's where they're from. But cremation families, they'll drive 50 miles, right? We've all seen that. They'll drive 50 miles for the right value. And so it's not that you're sharing that pie with the 3 other competitors in town. Now you're sharing it with everyone. So it's a little bit harder to track the percentage of the pie. So it's probably easier for them to track call volume. But to me, I think I would be interested in knowing that percentage.
Right. And Ellery, if I might share just a few lessons learned from working with these funeral directors on a few things they should be looking out for. One is when they're planning for the following year, let's say they did 200 calls last year, just to maintain, using your example, just to maintain 200 cases. In this year, for example, you fired off social media, for example, and Google Ads that got you 200 calls. But leveraging same exact tactic might not necessarily get you to 200 calls. You might have to fire off more things because there's more competition coming in now. So that's why having a marketing plan, let's say you want to get to 225, the gap you might think is 25 calls from 200 to 225. You might think the gap is 25 that you need to figure out how to get there. But in reality, if you fire off the same exact strategies, it might only hit 180, 185.
Right. It might lose some effectiveness over time.
Right. So I typically, when we carve out these marketing plans, we're trying to overshoot a little bit more just to make sure there's a little buffer built in there, just in case.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Right.
Well, do you have a sense of what, and this is just a question that's rattling around in my mind, but do you have a sense of what percentage of revenue a funeral home should be spending on marketing?
I will give you a benchmark from other industries.
Okay.
Or it's a very, very different. So for example, in the home improvement sector, typically you don't have a lot of reoccurring customers, like windows and doors, for example. They would put up to typically around 8%.
8%.
Which is a lot.
Yeah.
8%. But they know they got to spend money to generate leads. That industry, they are very used to it. Long time ago, they already started doing a lot of TV, radio, yellow pages. They're used to, right, spending money to generate leads.
Right.
In the funeral industry, obviously, it's a lot less than that.
Yeah. What do you think the average funeral home spends on marketing?
Probably 3%. Right.
Yeah. Do you think that's because they, if they're established business in town, they're just going to get so many calls regardless? Right. Where the windows and doors are not, right? They have to go out and hunt and drag something home every time.
Right.
Yeah, that makes sense. Sense. And then if a funeral home is spending, let's just call it 5%. We all know that, the sexy thing is online advertising, right? And social media, but billboards still work, right? I mean, ads still work. I mean, believe it or not, people still open the yellow pages. I wouldn't say put a ton of money in there, but you have to be visible. Do you have a sense of what funeral homes should be spending, like offline versus online?
I would say I have a weird philosophy is that I wouldn't shift. It gets very, very dangerous to shift what used to work already and shift everything online. It's odd coming from a digital marketing person. I love digital.
Yeah.
But offline, let's say you did radio, TV, all these, it got you to this amount, 300 calls. And what you need, digital comes in to supplement that. You got to be doing multi-channel marketing these days.
Right.
It's very dangerous to pull away TV, which is a little hard to track, and then shift all of that budget online. So I will typically, my mindset is a little bit different. If we can spend $1 and one channel might get you $1.10 back, I will do it, right? Easy. If under channel, I put in $1, it gets me $1 and a cent back, $1 and 1 penny back. I will still do it. You just want to find as many channels as possible. Yeah. That's how I look at these are more investment than expenses.
Yeah, that's interesting. If I can put $1 in and get $1.10 out, I'm going to keep feeding dollars in there.
Yeah, I would.
I'm going to keep feeding that machine. I'm going to borrow dollars from other people to feed that machine. Yeah, that's an interesting way. I think at the root of all of it, Welton, if you're going to set goals for next year, you have to know what you did this year. And the only way you know what you did this year is if you were tracking it. And one of the things I think, and this is not exclusive to funeral service, but one of the things traditional service businesses do that are established, that have customers that come to them, just kind of because they're known and they've got a great reputation and they've got legacy in town, is more and more people are having to market their services, right? So there's less loyalty for funeral homes. They have to kind of go out and find more customers. And so, in the past, I think they would say, okay, well, we're going to spend, I don't know, call it $10,000 this year or $20,000 this year. And then they would just kind of spray it around, right? They spray it around. And the problem with that is, you don't know the efficacy of it, right? We don't know whether it's working. We don't know if you picked up, let's say you took 20% of your $10,000 and you put it in radio, 20% in television, 20% newspaper, et cetera. And let's say that you got 20 new calls this year. If you don't know where it came from, the next year you're going to do the exact same thing and it may not work as well. Right. Whereas if you could pinpoint and say, okay, well, radio, which it probably isn't, but let's say radio gave you those 20 new calls, I'd be putting a lot more money in the radio, right? Because that's that dollar machine where you're getting $1.10 back out. Yeah,
right.
but I think the lesson here is that you just have to track it.
Yeah,
And that's not easy to do, you know.
no,
It's
no,
easy to have a little clipboard, and I see it in the funeral homes, and they can look at that clipboard and say, okay,
right,
we're at 85 calls this year.
right,
We're on track to do this, which is, better or worse than last year. That's
right,
kind of the basic measurement that I see
right,
in there. But at the end of the day, if you really want to get serious about stretching your dollars, right, making
correct.
that dollar more affordable, or making that dollar stretch, buy more with that dollar, you have
Yeah.
to really track it.
Oh yeah, right,
Yeah. So let me ask you this, Welton. So when you're strategizing with your customers,
right.
let's say that using your example, I want to go from 200 to 225,
Mhm,
and I'm going to spend 50% of my marketing. I'm just throwing these numbers out there on digital.
mhm.
Where do digital has got different channels, right? So where would you spend that 50%?
Right. Typically, I will say there's a science to sequencing.
What does
So
that mean?
sequencing means depending on search typically will be going after those that are a little bit more, they have intention already. So
Right.
typically, I love search a little bit more because you're strictly targeting those who are problem aware. They go on Google, they might type in funeral home near me,
Right.
patient, Atlanta, for example. So you're targeting those who are already problem aware. So we'll typically saturate search first. Then we'll go upstream, up the funnel, start working with clients on more on display interruption-based advertising. So to use that analogy offline is if you think about radio, TV, right, all those offline channels, billboards, when they heard you on radio, they're not problem aware yet, but you're building awareness,
Right.
which is needed, right?
Yeah.
So statistically, it takes 7 touches before it sinks in your brand or your messaging. So
Yeah.
I love branding type advertisement as well, but sequencing means I want to exhaust search first,
Right.
right? Then we'll go upstream to build our awareness. And
Yeah.
social media is great for branding, get the name out there.
It's really interesting that you say that about the awareness, and it's very timely because we're recording this, a couple weeks after the election, and there's been studies that have shown that people will cast a ballot for a name they recognize,
Right.
right?
Mhm.
And so that's why you see a gazillion signs out there, with
Right.
the one name, one name, one name, and people that they've done on exit polls when truthfully they don't know why they voted for them, and they answer, is because that name's familiar to me, that name recognition, so
Right.
it's yeah, so that's definitely it, and you definitely have to be willing to invest in the awareness because
Right.
that's the long game,
That is.
right?
I
That's the
love
long game.
those type of strategies too.
Yeah, that's the long game. And I probably if I were to probably compare like a full service funeral home versus like a direct cremation
Right.
company,
Mhm.
I'm probably going to think that the funeral home is going to be playing more the long game.
Right.
Right. And the
Definitely.
direct cremation company is going to be kind of going after that search, right? That at
Right.
need,
Right.
somebody died. We need to put our name in front of them right now.
Right.
So they're probably going to put a lot more money,
Right.
into that. So
Mhm.
yeah, interesting. And so they would set a percentage, they're going to try to divvy that percentage up between search and maybe, awareness. What, what would you do offline?
Right.
I know that's not your world, but let's
No.
say it's
Right.
Hong Funeral Home,
Right.
right? Where are you putting some money offline?
Our clients have good success still with TV and radio.
Mhm.
Those two channels still do very well for that demographics they're trying to reach, right? Especially radio, TV, those 65 and plus, that pre-planning age, TV and radio still do very well,
Yeah.
right? And
I
they're
would
not
think,
that expensive
yeah, I was
compared
about to say, I think you can
to
take
no,
cable TV for,
yeah,
probably, what do you think? $300 or $400?
yeah, the CPM has come down a
Yeah.
lot, right? Yeah, even Google next year or the year after will be helping. Um, you can go direct placement on TV and
Oh,
radio.
nice.
Yeah, yeah. So that's coming. That'll be fun.
Yeah, that'll be
Yeah,
awesome. That'll be
yeah, because
awesome.
your local TV, they're not that expensive to run anymore.
Yeah.
Mhm,
Yeah. Yeah. I
mhm.
learned about advertising when one day I was probably 17 years old. And I remember staying home from school one day, and I remember seeing all these, this is going to be terrible, but I remember seeing all of these commercials for like bankruptcy lawyers. right? And it was all at like 11 o'clock in the morning or noon or 10 o'clock in the morning. I remember asking my mom, why are there so many, attorney commercials like that? And she said, because if people are watching this now, they're out of work, right? And, they may have problems. And so I kind of learned that, they dial that in right at the right time. So yeah, I'm sure TV is probably still effective for that.
They still work. Great branding, getting a message out there. Right.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, listen, we'll wrap this one up. This has been a great episode. I think it's just something to think about. We're all going to think about it in 6 weeks when it's the new year. We're going to think, oh, what do we want to do this year? And personally and professionally. So I think just getting a head start on just thinking about it now.
Start now.
And setting a goal, setting a realistic goal, but more important than that, how to achieve it, like how to break it down, like how you're actually going to do that. And then that can kind of get into some tactics. Next week or on the next episode, we're going to be talking about doing SWOT analysis, and I'm really excited about that. So it's going to be a real opportunity to kind of take a peek inside what a funeral home should be looking at as far as running their business goes. But if you found value in this episode, or the podcast in general, we'd appreciate if you'd go to iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, any of them, and leave a review. We'd really appreciate that. And we put something out on Instagram the other day asking for ideas, just different things. And we got a lot in. But if any of the listeners have any topics you want Welton and I to dive into that we can provide value for, we will, or we'll grab a guest that is an expert in that department or that field. We'll bring them in to do that. So we have a lot of good episodes planned. We are also setting goals for 2021 for the podcast. And so we hope to grow it and hope to add a lot more value to funeral professionals out there in the next year. So Welton, until next time, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right.
Later, guys.